Good afternoon. I do hope everyone is doing well today and is staying safe out there. For this week's discussion, talking about the size of the country and the effectiveness of the government. The question is the United States too big to be governed effectively? Well, I think the easy answer is yes. There does seem to be today a great divide between the people and the government. In the lectures of Dr. Livingston, there were several things he had mentioned that really struck me. He talked about even from the time of Jefferson, he points out that there was this belief that the country may need to be divided into three federations. He also mentioned that Aristotle believed that there needed to be a limit in the size of the republic, about 300,000 people, and that anything beyond 300,000 people, you start losing effectiveness of the government. And that if you reached around 1 million people, then you would collapse into an empire. Livingston pointed out that Althusius argued that even for a larger federation, could be maintained, but again, no larger than the country of Sweden. And how Hume argued for even larger republic, but nothing larger than Great Britain. If you become too large, you lose your republican government and you become an empire. Livingston had pointed out that there are 435 members in the House of Representatives. A majority is only 218, and if a quorum is needed, 110. So we do not have the kind of representation that's afforded to all. Livingston pointed out, and James Madison thought that there should be one representative for every 30,000 people in the House. If we had that ratio today of one representative for every 30,000 people, there would be 10,500 members in the House of Representatives, which would be a tremendous loss of self-government. Dr. Livingston pointed out that in the first Congress in 1790, if it had the same ratio representation that we have today, with one representative for every 758,000 people, that there would be only 5 members in the House of Representatives, and that 8 states would have no representatives. That is the quality of representation we have today, which is why size and scale becomes very important to the notions of political liberty and representation. In an article that I read by Michael Dougherty, he talks about the size of the country, but not just about the size of the country, about its effectiveness of governing it, but also about the size of the government itself. He mentions in his article that there are 15 states today that have smaller populations than what the executive branch employs. He talks about trust. And the question is, what if trust in American democracy is eroding because the nation has become too big to be effectively governed? There's a poll that was taken by Reuters that found that nearly 1/4 of all Americans are open to the idea of succession. These numbers cut across partisan lines and different regions. It's not about North versus South, but other different kinds of breaking up. George Kennan, Dougherty mentions, the architect, of course, of U.S. containment policy, wondered whether or not the United States would have been better off if it would become more decentralized. That he wondered whether or not a dozen constituent republics, absorbing only the powers of the existing states, but a considerable part of those of the present federal establishment. But one wonders if even a dozen would be enough. James Madison, in Federalist 10, talked about the nature of an extended republic. He believed that by enlarging the republic, you could achieve the enlightened representational idea of classical republicanism, but without the debilitating influence of factions. Unfortunately, it seems that Madison was wrong. Factionalism today seems to be debilitating large parts of the country today. At some point, Madison does concede that the legislative districts could become so large that the connection between representatives and the representation or the represented is going to be effectively severed. With a population of more than 325 million and an enormously complex society with an ever-growing bureaucratic government, has the country passed a point where no matter who is elected, it risks alienating more than half the country? As a result of this country becoming more and more fractionalized because of its distrust in the government to be able to fairly represent them, has the country grown too big to effectively govern? Many today believe that the government only represents a select few. With fractionalism rampant in the country today, many believe that the established political parties will only play to their base, only campaign to those they believe who will truly vote for them. So no matter who is elected president or which political party is in power, at least half of the population is always going to feel alienated because they believe that their views will never be fully or fairly represented. And you see this in the country, I believe, today. And it isn't just kind of a north-south thing, but you also see it in kind of a left versus right. You see this in a kind of rural versus urban, or the coast versus the middle state. Fractionalism seems to be very rampant today. And it makes you wonder, is the United States now truly too big to be governed effectively? And if that is the truth, if that is correct, then what will become of this country? Thank you for listening, and I hope, again, everyone has a wonderful day and stay safe out there.